This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to Radio Hadrian from a sunny and calm Barcelona. The events of this last week have been fascinating, and it's a very interesting and exciting time to be living in Barcelona. The images which you have seen and the reports which you have been reading will be giving you the official version, which is that the Spanish state is denying the Catalan people their democratic right to hold a referendum and vote for independence. In a sense, this is true. I mentioned last week that the Spanish constitution is crucial in this. Mariano Rajoy is doing what he is supposed to do. He has to uphold the sovereignty of Spain. He is bound to by the Spanish constitution. And in that constitution, it states that Spain is indivisible, that it must never be broken up, which clearly goes against independence. Now, that constitution was drawn up in 1978, 3 years after the present king's father, Juan Carlos, was appointed by Franco to rule the country. Now, when you think about that, Franco was a dictator. He knew he was going to die. He then appointed a king. He clearly appointed somebody who would walk in his footsteps. And without having any concrete evidence, it's easy to assume that that constitution was already discussed and that the concept of Spain as one whole country forever was going to be a very, very significant part of this constitution. And that is the thing which is behind all of this. Yes, the Catalans can demand a referendum, and yes, they can have a referendum, but technically it would be an illegal referendum because it goes against the Constitution of Spain. But all of these images that you are being shown, they're fabulous images. I mean, they are wonderful images, and the media are having a field day with this. You know, we have mass crowds of people jamming the streets. No vehicles, no cars can get through. Outside all of the government buildings, protesting that they want their democratic right to hold a referendum upheld. And Spain is the enemy. Spain is the big bad enemy. And we have the politicians here being arrested. Now this is an ongoing thing. Politicians here do get arrested, and they do go to court, and they get ticked off a little bit, but nothing ever happens. It's all a circus. It's all a stage play, and they're all playing their part. This whole scenario that you have seen this week has been carefully staged, managed, and planned for months. It has been planned since way back before the date of the referendum was announced. That's going back to June. Now, back then, President Trump and Mariano Rajoy, Prime Minister of Spain, arranged a meeting. That meeting takes place this week. After a week of, there was no violence. It was a festival. It was a festival, and it will continue to be a festival. And as I've said before, there's nothing the Catalans like more, particularly in Barcelona, than to have a festival and to be out waving flags and singing songs. And it is very passionate. It's wonderful. But it's not revolutionary, and it's not going to get independence. Even if it gets a referendum, we know referendums don't bring independence. Now, the Scots in particular have taken a big interest in this because there are a lot of similarities between Scotland and Catalonia when it comes to independence politics. And we've had loads and loads of Scots on social media changing their profile pictures to the Estelada and coming out in solidarity with the Catalan people and demanding that Spain gives the Catalans their democratic right to hold a referendum, and it is known as a Scottish-style referendum. The Catalan government demanded a Scottish-style referendum. This is laughable. This is such a farce. Scotland had a referendum in 2014, as we know. That referendum was rigged. There was no way Scotland was going to be allowed to leave the UK. It was patronising to allow them to have the referendum, but it was always going to be a no. And if you consider that that referendum was, as Alex Salmond said, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, well, that moment's gone. The opportunity's passed. And the Scots were set up to lose. No other referendum is going to have the same impact. And, again, as we know, referendums don't bring independence. After the referendum in Scotland, the Scots were urged to vote to get as many people joining in the SNP and then to vote for SNP to get as many MPs into Westminster to get a majority. And we were told that if we had a majority that we could declare independence. Well, we voted for them. We got 56. We got the majority. And from then on, independence was a non-event. It wasn't mentioned. Nicola Sturgeon didn't talk about it. In fact, she became more and more pro-union, being member of the Privy Council, attending Royal Ascot, etc., etc. So Scotland is as far away from independence as ever. The same thing has happened here, because as I talked about in last week's programme, Carlas Puigdemont inherited a mandate from Artur Mas to declare independence. He also got his majority. And 2 years ago, Oriol Junqueras said if a majority was voted in, he would declare independence. That was 2 years ago today. The majority was voted in, nothing's happened. Nothing's happened about independence. And yet we're crying out for a referendum here, and the Scots are crying out for a referendum, Indy Ref 2 in Scotland. And we are being set up and we are being duped. And the independence leaders are highly complicit in both our countries. So that's where the similarities are. But here's where the differences are. Here in Catalonia, where you've seen these from where these fabulous images are coming from, and this media field day is taking place, there is a difference. Barcelona is the epicenter of Catalan politics. It's not difficult to walk around Barcelona and encounter politicians. Everything happens in Barcelona. That's not to acknowledge that there's a lot of independence movement outside of the city, but this is the epicenter, so everything happens here. The other thing is that you have to remember, and I say this particularly to the Scots who have been getting very, very excited about what's happening here and saying, look at the Catalans, they know how to do it, they've got passion, they're determined, look what they're doing. Well, you know what, they're not doing anything. They're having another party, another festival. And the weather, you have to remember, the weather is quite pleasant here. Even at this time of the year, it's very, very pleasant weather. So it's easy to come out. It's also worth bearing in mind that there's a massive cultural difference. The Scots are very capable of making a big noise. When you have rallies and marches in Scotland, yes, you make a big noise, but you have to gather people from all over Scotland. There isn't one centre like there is here. Glasgow may be the yes city, well it was, I don't know if it still is, but Edinburgh is where you're going to find the politicians because that's where the Scottish government is. So you don't have an epicentre in Scotland. That's not to say that you can't muster people, and I know I read lots and lots of notices for events like the rallies and the marches, and people do travel. People will go long distances to attend these things. However, it's so easy here to get people to get together. The other thing is that you have to remember Catalans are Mediterranean people, and it is a noisy culture. So getting thousands and thousands, maybe millions of people together to protest against something is something that you can do really well here, and people do it well here. They are a noisy people, and I say that with respect. I live amongst them, and I am quite conscious of the differences between Scotland, Australia and here in terms of cultural noise. People talk loudly here, and often it sounds as though they're shouting, but they're not shouting, they're actually talking loudly, and it's happy noise. Most of the time it's happy noise. And that's what I see in the demonstrations that we've seen this week. Lots of Mediterranean people making a happy noise about wanting a referendum. A referendum they don't need to have. And this is the thing that is not being said in the media. The referendum doesn't need to take place. Whether it does take place or not will depend on events that happen over the next week. And it will be very interesting to see things unfold. But they are, the Catalan people shouting for democracy and want to have a referendum is not what they should be shouting for. They should be shouting to Puigdemont and saying, declare independence now. Do what you can do. And he could be a hero. He could stand up and declare independence and be an absolute hero. But of course, he won't do that because he would lose face. He's also complicit in this. In fact, he's totally complicit. So he would not be able to suddenly declare. He never mentions his mandate. He never mentions UDI. He only talks about Scottish-style referendums. And we will stand up to Spain. Spain is a big bad enemy. Whilst it's similar to Scotland, it's not exactly the same. Any Scots listening to this, please stop supporting Catalans demanding democracy. That's the official line. That's the official line that is being pushed here. And that's the official line that so many people, so many hamsters believe. They believe the official line. They should be shouting for independence, to declare. But they don't. They eat the official food and then they shout the official chants and sing the official songs and wave the official flags. And that's exactly where the New World Order wants us to be. They don't want people who question things. We send children to school, and we send those children to school and we don't like them to ask questions. We spoon feed them information. There are smart kids that get through that and do ask questions, but the majority of children are there to become good little citizens of their future countries, and that is not a system that allows for questioning and asking, why is this happening? Why isn't this happening? So we start off early, and by the time you get to voting age, you believe the official line. So we would dearly, dearly love Scots to support the Catalans for sure, but support them for the right reason. Encourage them to open their eyes. I encourage Scots to open their eyes as well. I know there are plenty of Scots who do have their eyes open, but not enough. And some of them don't have their eyes wide open enough to see through the official lies and to realise we are all being duped and lied to and set up. And that referendums don't bring independence. Please don't support Catalans calling for democracy. Support Catalans to demand DUI. I'm keeping it short this week. I'm frustrated about what people are believing from the official story, and I've had my say now. I've said the things that I wanted to say, but I'm going to keep this very short, and in a moment I'm going to have an interview with David about his view on this to further explain to Scots why you should not be supporting Catalans' cry for democracy. And that doesn't mean you don't support Catalans. That means you can see through the lies and you encourage Catalans and Scots to call for declaration. Thanks for listening. I'll speak to you next week. Well, let's see what happens next week. Perhaps we'll be speaking to you from the world's newest independent country shortly. If only. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.
This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.
Okay, this is part 2 of the English version of Radio Hadrian for week 14. And as I said a moment ago, I'm going to have a chat or an interview, if you like, with David about the events of this week and what it really means, to try and help English-speaking people understand what is happening here in Catalonia at this moment. Okay, good afternoon, David.
Good afternoon, Delia.
Your thoughts on the events of this week?
Well, it's a bit difficult to express what somebody who's been fighting for independence the whole life, the independence of a country that's been submitted by the force of arms 300 years ago in days like this. But we have to give a vision that is not the vision that's being provided by mainstream media. We already have a mandate 2 years ago to declare independence, and our parliament and our government are avoiding doing so, and they are dragging us towards a referendum we don't want, we don't need, and we can't win. And what we're seeing as a signification is It's a Truman Show where both sides are controlled by Spain and its allies in NATO and the world powers, and they are avoiding that the Catalan people are chanting for independence now and singing things like democracy, we want to vote, referendum, that are not synonymous of democracy. On the contrary, I'll just say this. When we voted and we won independence 2 years ago, having a referendum now is not only not democracy, it's the opposite of democracy, because it means ignoring the democratic decision of the people of Catalonia on the 27th of September 2015. So I'm a bit worried, and also worried about personal consequences for those who have been fighting this farce for the last 4 years.
Okay, and am I correct in thinking that 2 years ago, prior to the election, where Artur Mas gained a majority of diputats and a mandate for independence, Oriol Junqueras stated that if a majority was elected, independence would be declared?
Yeah, he literally said that if we won the 27th of September, no more referendums were needed. But that, as you know, is the eternal dangling carrot in front of our noses in every country in the world. And it's also tell us about this frog that gets boiled little by little. If when 2 million Catalans were forming a human chain in September 2013, they would have been told that the final plan was to have a referendum 6 years later in 2019, which is what it seems that the plans of the world are, we would have said no way. But they've been moving us through the motions of a non-binding referendum 2014, an election 2015, now this referendum 1st of October, and now final surprise 2019. So something that wouldn't have been accepted by the people if offered at once has been delivered in 4 or 5 little chunks that can be easier to swallow by the poor Catalan frog.
The poor Catalan frog. Is it right then that Spain is denying Catalans their democratic right to anything?
Well, it is true, but the question is, they have been occupying Catalonia for 300 years, so it's not a matter that now they are doing it or that there's a coup. The coup happened 300 years ago. It was renewed by Franco in 1936. And when he died, people around him said, we have left everything under control, tight and well tied. So the way of tying everything in Catalonia was infiltrating everything we love, our parties, our media, our social organizations, and lastly, our social media. So everything we love and care for works for them while barking for them. They bark at them, but they bite us. So it's true they're denying us that, but they do it in a more perverse way. They're pushing people towards a referendum, then that's the way that the world order needs to stifle the nation's right to independence. Independence only can come through UDI.
Okay, yes. And how similar do you see this as with the situation in Scotland?
As far as I know, there's more similarities than differences. First, we both had a majority for UDI, which is the only way to independence. And both our sides, using people infiltrated in social media, have been telling us that UDI would bring problems and it cannot be. But sad as it is, and if we forget everything they put in our brains, there's only 2 ways to end a national conflict like Scottish or Catalan conflict. One is UDI, and that's the only way to independence. And the other is a lost referendum, which is the only way to kill independence. So the powers that be have managed the miracle that have millions of Scots and Catalans barking at the wrong tree. Because we are barking at the referendum tree that it is the instrument that our enemies use to murder independence.
I read somewhere this week, and it was with regards to Catalonia, that referendums, as we know, as you and I know, and lots of people listening know, referendums don't bring independence. And at the moment here in Catalonia, we have this big push to have a referendum. And we know what a farce this is. But I did read somewhere that said this referendum won't go anywhere and Catalonia will be forever enveloped in Spain and the indivisibility of Spain will remain intact.
Well, that's what most of the things we read. We have to realize, and sorry for the auto promotion, but Radio Hadrian is the only media in the whole world, thanks to KA Radio, which is telling the truth about both the Scottish and Catalan processes. And this has to be emphasized because, as we learned from Solomon Ash, the powers that be need unanimous lies to make us swallow the most incredible things, like the referendums bring independence or all this kind of things. So it's tremendously important that these programs, these chapters, are spread worldwide because it's the only opportunity we have to debunk the lies. The question was
if Catalonia has a referendum and it's going to be rigged, we know this, and we know it won't bring independence, and the Catalans will lose this referendum, Catalonia will be forever engulfed in the indivisibility of the sovereign state of Spain.
At this point, it's not sure that the 1st of October referendum will happen, but it is a technicality because even if it happens, it won't be given international recognition. So that's only a technicality. It's the prestige. It's the disinformation. It's the intoxication prior to the trick the illusionists have to do. The illusionists probably are going to announce an agreed referendum the Scottish way, which didn't go very well for Scottish independentists, did it?
No.
And to do that, they have to create tension. That tension will force international involvement in this, which is what Spain needs, because you were right. According to Spanish constitution, Spanish sovereignty cannot be divided or cannot be put to referendum. So they need to create the conditions for the international world to get involved in it, and then they'll be forced, if you know what I mean, to do a referendum, the referendum they need to gain independence.
And they certainly have been doing this recently. We've had a series of events going back over a month ago when we had the attack in Barcelona, which brought the whole world's attention to this city. And since then, there have been other events of a different nature, accumulating in the events of this week, which the whole world is watching. Every media source in the world is watching what happens here. What do you think of all of that?
Well, as I see it as a tremendous Hollywood film, I approach myself to this concentration which is in front of court, supposedly to get the detained people out. Well, I have to say that Luis Salvador, one of the number 2 in the economy department, I met 5 years ago, and by the lies and by the way he behaved, I already knew that he was working undercover for Spain. So now it's not a big surprise that they detain people that actually work for Spain, because there's 2 ways they handle these things. When they only detain or bring to court people that work for them, so they create heroes. The real people who are dissident or fighting for independence, they kill, like Willie McRae in Scotland or Muriel Casals in Catalonia, or they put in mental institution, threaten, isolate, torture, and induce to suicide, like it's in my case, but they didn't succeed. So that's the way. They don't create heroes. They only attack their own to make people defend them, and so they are running both sides. It's a fake conflict at this moment. Only UDI will bring independence.
Okay. So what do you think the real outcome is intended to be? Let's say from a NATO perspective.
Well, NATO doesn't gamble, and as I remember in a film with John Pilger, he mentioned there was a CIA agent saying, whatever is not in the interest of the United States, it's not on. It's not going to happen.
Absolutely.
And we have to realize that Quebec, Scotland, and Catalonia share that they are part of very precious allies of the United States. Canada is the neighbor and ally. UK is the main ally in Europe, and Spain has been like the minion who's been going to all the wars waged by them. So NATO is not going to allow their own member states to break just because the peoples of Scotland, Quebec, and Catalonia want it. So they used the referendum trick twice in Quebec. Once in Scotland, the referendum that it was rigged with the connivance of their own leaders. And now they're trying to play the same trick in Catalonia. I would like to explain the importance of timing in referendums, if it's okay.
Yes, that's fine. No, go ahead.
There's more ways than one to rig a referendum. Not only exchanging the ballot boxes, as we know from Stalin, it's not the votes that count, but who counts the votes. but also playing with
time. Could I interject on that
Totally.
point? You just mentioned something very valid. Do we know who owns the ballot counting system in the UK?
Well, I don't know. I know that IDOX is involved, and we know the shenanigans with the bringing the ballot boxes and everything that happened in the Scottish referendum. I haven't gone into the technicalities here in Catalonia, because even if it happens, it's not going to bring independence. So we shouldn't go for their intoxication smoking campaigns.
No, I was thinking more in terms of the fact that IDOX is owned by a well-known unionist, and that recently IDOX bought the rights to the company in Europe that's also responsible for vote counting. I just think it's I know it's a little bit of a smokescreen, but it's all part of the bigger plan to make sure that nothing gets in the way of NATO's ultimate plan.
I agree with that, but in the difference here, the referendum you had in Scotland was the real thing, because it was the time to murder Scottish independence. While the referendum here is just a distraction, because the real referendum will come when international pressure for what Spain is doing these days is going to force it. That's why for the last days we even had Nicola Sturgeon having a tweet message praising the Edinburgh Agreements that were the door to the Scottish referendum rigging. So they keep telling us that, oh, we wish we had a Cameron, oh, we wish we had a Scottish referendum. So this, to me, as we know that the world is a film, it seems like a big spoiler of the end. The end is going to be that. I was commenting the importance of timing.
Yes.
Because we assume rigging is only changing ballot papers or doing these things, but one of the most sneaky but important and relevant ways to rig a referendum is to jiggle with the timing of it.
Yes, absolutely.
In Scotland, they murder independence by putting the Scottish independence referendum before the Brexit one. Because if the referendum had been after the Brexit one, a lot more people who were told that by voting Scottish independence they were getting evicted from European Union would have voted for yes. And it doesn't matter, because we know that people already voted yes, but it would have been still more difficult to rig it. Was the majority for yes tremendous? In Catalonia they're doing the opposite, and that's the main way they're rigging it. We had 40-point advantage in 2013 for independence. That was the moment to do a referendum. Nobody would have believed that the referendum would bring about a no. So now they're rigging it by postponing it till people get tired, new scandals appear, new parties have appeared, and people get tired. You cannot maintain 2 million people on the streets for 7 years.
No, and of course the election that was the result of the non-binding referendum that took place here, or the opinion poll. The election took place after the Scottish referendum. It also took place after the massive rise of the SNP in terms of party numbers, and the May 2015 council elections, Westminster elections in the UK, which resulted in Scotland getting its mandate for independence and its majority of MPs. And then the election took place here a few months later in September.
Yes. At that moment, both Catalonia and Scotland had a historical opportunity to declare independence, and in both countries it didn't happen. And we need to make an effort to understand that after 3 years of submission, everything and anything we love works for our enemies, even when they pretend to work for us. Because that's normal. That's what states do. States protect themselves by making it impossible for slave colonies or nations to rise against them. But the way to work for them is to say they work against them, because this way they control 99% of the population. If you attack Nicola Sturgeon or the SNP, you're called a traitor, a mole, or out of your brains nowadays in Scotland. And the same happens in Catalonia. So they've won with both sides working for them. We cannot win.
So you just mentioned Nicola and how in social media particularly, but probably off social media, if you have the audacity to criticize Nicola, you pay for it. You'll be told in no uncertain terms you don't touch Nicola. Now, is it the same here with Puigdemont?
It's very similar with Puigdemont, Junqueras, and these things, but we have to realize, hard as it is, that the most relevant asset of Westminster in Scotland is Nicola Sturgeon, because that's the best kept secret. Sadly as it is, it's an oxymoron, but only your friend can betray you, because your enemy you see coming. but only your friend can stab you in the back. So the most relevant secret, and there's a lot of English or British shills defending the SNP, defending Nicola Sturgeon, defending referendum, and attacking UDI. Because Sturgeon, SNP, and referendum are the babies of Westminster to keep Scotland enslaved, and UDI is the only way out.
And it's the same here.
It's the same here.
And on the subject of UDI, in Scotland, when you mention UDI, there's often a reaction which says it's like, we don't want another Northern Ireland. So many people in Scotland remember Northern Ireland, and it also affected Scotland because the west of Scotland in Glasgow is affiliated with Northern Ireland. So that's generally the reaction. They think of UDI as being violent, lots of bloodshed. Is it the same reaction here when you mention it?
It's similar, where they say that internationally it wouldn't be recognized, but basically we have to be able to forget everything they tell us, and we have to grow up. We need to be one-person armies, and we have to look truth directly without intermediation of media or politicians. And when you do that, you realize only UDI is independence. Only way to kill it is referendum. And of course, it's like a Greek dilemma. You know, you have two doors. One brings to independence and the other brings to death of independence. So normally, if UDI is the only door to independence, you're gonna have enemies of the independence of Scotland guarding that door and tell you to pass through the other door. Where the other door is referendum, and there's a guillotine called rigging, which is at the other side of the referendum door. So most people attacking UDI are either paid pipers of the British government, or people that have sadly been manipulated and influenced by the aforementioned spies.
Or people who only see UDI in terms of Northern Ireland.
But that's been put into their minds, because but if you don't want independence through UDI, you don't want independence, because there's no other way to get it. So things have to be clear. You cannot win Olympic gold medal in swimming if you don't like getting wet.
Yes, that's a good metaphor. Another good metaphor. So what's the let's say Puigdemont with his mandate suddenly decided this week, look, I'm going to declare. I'm going to be a hero of the people. What would be the international situation legally?
Well, the first would be a shock, because he is paid and put there to do precisely the contrary. So they possibly would think that he's gone mad and he would be finished.
It was a hypothetical question.
Yes, but it's important to clarify that, because as we said in chapter 3, he's somebody who's been put with very weird combinations of votings and people being threatened, and him being helped by spy Joan Vives and Soler Vicens to become president. So that's not
maybe we should refer listeners back to chapter 3.
To chapter 3 and chapter 4, Junqueras, chapter 5, Joan Vives and Soler Vicens. He is a New Order mole who's there to murder independence for them. But if he did that, but we have nothing to believe that, because if you have people being detained and everything being done, and you have a majority, you declare independence. Why should a president support or endure these humiliations of our people when he has a mandate, a majority to declare? What's worse, and I'll put an example. They have disbanded the parliament. The parliament is not having session till after the 1st of October. Well, you would think that in this moment of aggression, they would be sleeping there. So we have the contradiction that we have the people sleeping on the streets to defend our institutions, and we have our institutions on holidays. How about that?
Yes, how about that? Exactly. Okay, I had one more question. Okay, for people listening from other countries, English-speaking countries particularly, and especially Scotland, here in Barcelona, is there a feeling of revolution or violence? There's no violence, is there?
There's
the stage-managed violence, perhaps.
Well, it's I would have to explain, I think, to answer properly this, what I think the powers that be objective in the Catalan crisis are, and then I could explain that. The powers that be don't want independences in Catalonia, in Scotland, in Quebec, nowhere, because they want bigger units which are easier to control. But there's different ways to do that. In South America, they do coup, and in other places of the world, they do wars. But in Europe, they use democracy. So the result has to be Scotland and Catalonia not being independent. That's the objective that they won't renounce. But then there's a second objective, which is to obtain it through technically democratic ways, and that is lost rigged referendums. But to reach the lost rigged referendum in Catalonia, they have to do it through international pressure. To get that, they're doing everything they're doing now. Because there's two more objectives, because states work with century or 50-year on plan. They don't work in fortnights. And there's two other objectives here. They have to protect their moles running the Catalan country. Because it's an operation, it took 10 years to infiltrate Junqueras or Puigdemont or Forcadell. All these people works for them, but we love them. It's a very relevant asset. So these people have to pretend to want independence so they can be stay put and they can keep controlling Catalonia for 50 years more. And the last objective is national depression. When you've been marching for 7 years in 2 million strong people, and then you do a referendum and you lose it, you forget independence for a century because you think that you'll never get it. So they're playing with our brains. I think the organizations and the concentrations are organized by our enemy. We only play the stunts there. And they're there to make sure we don't sing, we want independence. Now when we sing, we want to vote, we're not scared, not one step backwards, which are the things that we shouldn't be singing. We should be singing, declare independence now.
You, from an international perspective, I would have thought that if you look at the images and you read the reports, that people in Barcelona should be scared because of the apparent tension that is supposed to exist here in Barcelona at the moment. But I have to say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see any tension. I don't hear any tension. In fact, I see people enjoying the marching, enjoying the pots and pans revolution, and the media having a field day.
But as you know, there's safety in numbers. As I was saying there, the media forms part of this big show, as we know, since Operation Mockingbird, and Puigdemont himself comes from the media, and we know this. I spoke with 6 media, including Reuters, France Press, and televisions from China, London, France, and Switzerland. One of these in these concentrations.
This last week.
This last week. And they were just interviewing people saying the typical things. Oh, we want democracy. It reminds us of Franco, and the typical fragile old ladies saying this well-intentioned but empty things. And when I explain, listen, we have a mandate for 2 years, and there's infiltration here, and they're cajoling us into a referendum we cannot win to protect the New World Order, their faces froze, because what I was telling them is what they know. So everybody knows these things except the people. Every media, every politician in the world know that this is a fraud. The historical example, I think, might be possibly Pearl Harbor. I mean, we have Delano Roosevelt wanted to enter Second World War, but he had promised not to do so, and 80% of American population was against it. But then they didn't heed the advertences from Australia and other radars, and Pearl Harbor happened, and bling, one day to the other, people in favor of the war, and the war happens.
Yes.
So they are experts in manipulating us. Absolutely. Because they control everything, and that's why it's so important to protect Radio Hadrian and to make it grow, because it's the only thing. There's one important thing I would like to say, and maybe could be a closing for this interview, unless you have
can you say what you need
something
to say
else in mind. It is not nationalism that moves me to say this, but we have to take Catalonia first, because then comes Scotland, and there comes a lot of more things that needs to be changed in this world. In Catalonia, there's a few people who have spotted what's going on, and we're not scared to going to the end, to dismantle how they play with us, how they push us towards that we don't need, and that's in their own interest. So we need to win Catalonia first, because it will open the eyes of a lot of people in Scotland about how our own side betrays us.
Okay, and on that note, we might stop. I hope this has been useful for anybody who's listening, and that it sheds some light on the myth of the Catalan democratic process of this time. Bye for now. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.
Good afternoon, Scotland. This is David Raventós in this chapter 14 of Radio Hadrian. As always, to please ask you, especially in this program, to share every way you can this program. We're going to tell you the truth about the independence process in Catalonia, a truth that you won't get anywhere else, and anywhere includes even the media you consider to be pro-independence in Scotland, like Bella Caledonia, Wings of Scotland, or The National. Because, as we're going to explain in this program, everything we love in Scotland and Catalonia is in our enemies' hands. And we need to take control back to the people if we want to declare independence in our countries. In this program, I'd like to go on about the real situation in Catalonia, then how everything is advancing towards a referendum, the Scottish style, and how people are collaborating with that. Then I'll explain the process since 2009 here, and why the persecution they did of dissidents, including my case, is related to hide the truth from Catalans that I was endangering to unveil. And then finally, how the people we are preparing to take power and declare independence as soon as we can. First of all, I want to encourage our friends in Scotland or anywhere in the world to understand the images that are being sent to the world. Now, mainstream media work for the interest of the power that be, not for the interest of people. We should already have that clear. So the images being sent are to depict the fake impression that referendum brings independence. We should clarify that. No referendum can bring independence from a NATO member state, like Canada with Quebec, like UK and Scotland, like Spain and Catalonia. Only UDI can do that. Referendums are the weapon of mass destruction of brains in the indie field to avoid us marching towards independence. So that's the way to interpret, and please, if you want to help Catalonia, help us by pushing our governments to declare UDI, which is the only way. They have a mandate to do that for 2 years now, and they are not only doing that, but they dismantled the parliament. So we have a big paradox. While people are concentrating outside institutions, our institution, the main institution, which is the parliament and has a mandate for independence, is on holidays. And that is done with a purpose, which is to avoid the dignified member of parliament would push to the declaration of independence, or that we encircle the parliament, the people chanting, "We want independence now." They have taken over. What you are seeing, it's a bit like the spring, the Arab Springs or the Colored Revolution, which are organized by New World Order agents, and they're stunts there. We go there in numbers to project the image that democracy is about to come, and nothing farther from the truth. We want independence that is only accomplished through UDI, and our side is letting us down. For the last years here, always the processes side, which is how we call the so-called pro-Indi side, but they're only enjoying this process to nowhere, have been saying that they wish we had a Scottish-style referendum. And this has accelerated in the last days. As we commented in the previous program, both our political and social leaders have said that they're open to negotiation. And then Puigdemont, Junqueras, Ada Colau, the mayoress of Barcelona. We're talking about people. We debunked Puigdemont in chapter 3, we debunked Junqueras in chapter 4, we debunked Colau in chapter 8, and Carme Forcadell from my NSC, which we have debunked in several chapters, sent a letter to Spanish government and King to say they accepted negotiating, etc. Then that was also published in Financial Times and Le Monde. And then finally, Nicola Sturgeon made a tweet saying that she respects the right to self-determination in Catalonia, and she praised the Edinburgh Agreement, which is the door to the referendum in Scotland. If you add, and it's in this light, and you have to understand, after 300 years of domination, both of Scotland and Catalonia. And that stands to reason. When you've been controlling an empire, when you've been controlling a country like Scotland or Catalonia for 300 years, that is not to let the people there to one day realize they want to be free and declare it. You have been taking measures to avoid that for decades, placing your people running parties, media, organization, and social media, pretending to work for independence but working for the union. And that's the only way to make sure the union will never break. No matter who you vote, no matter what you read, no matter which organization you belong to, and no matter how many so-called pro-indie groups you join in Facebook, they're all controlled by our enemies, so they'll never push for UDI. And it's in this light we should see things happening these days in Catalonia. Okay, the objective, and if we do the 1st of October or not, that's a technicality, because that won't bring independence in the month of October, which is what we should have done 2 years ago. So that is a smokescreen to force international pressure, so Spain has been pretending not to want referendum for 5 years now. But they really wanted and needed. The only way to murder independence is referendum. The only way to win independence is UDI. So now they need an excuse to tell their own side that they're going to accept grudgingly the referendum they need. And on the other side, the indie leaders that work for Spain will say that they've done their best and that our determination has finally granted us a Scottish-style referendum for 2019 that we'll lose, and then independence game over. So whenever you see all these things, of course there's a dictatorship in Spain, but not now. It's been a dictatorship for 300 years. 40 years ago they did some cosmetic changes, but the CIA cannot allow communism to run Spain or Catalonia to break up from Spain, and those two objectives have been there for the last 40 years. And they've created Podemos, which is a CIA false flag or submarine, and they're doing all the things they can. Since the false flag attack in Barcelona 1 month ago, they've been running Catalonia. They've sent extra people here to make sure Catalonia don't get out of control. So we are not at the door of a revolution because they're stifling. People are not singing for independence now, they're singing we want to vote. We already voted 2 years ago and won. So voting again is ignoring democracy. Now, hoping that that is clear, I want to explain what the real situation in Catalonia has been and how the process has evolved since 2009. In 2009, Spain controls everything, all the parties, but then in 2009, people started doing consultations for independence in individual towns, starting in Arenys de Munt, about 3,000 people, they voted for independence. And then after a couple of years, even Barcelona voted, and 700 towns and municipalities in Catalonia voted non-bindingly for independence. That was the only thing not controlled by Spain. That and a party, a political party, and a businessman organization, those three things were the only three things Spain couldn't control. And they neutralized them, and they broke the party, broke the business union, and broke the consultations, and they put their own controlled organizations in place, which is the Assemblea Nacional Catalana and Solidaritat Catalana and other things that are Spanish run, though we thought they worked for independence. And then from then on, from 2010, Spain has run the show on both sides completely. Everything that has happened has been run by Spain. That's why Artur Mas, with the complicity of every pro-indie party, media and everything, did a non-binding referendum in 2014 when it should have been a binding one, which would have brought the independence of Catalonia. Then in 2015, instead of marching all together and declaring independence, they lied to us saying we hadn't got a mandate, which is a lie. And then they waste 2 years more, and there's the 1st of October, which is a referendum that is not going to be non-binding, with all the signification we have with police entering places and detaining people, but they only detain people that work for them. That's the extent of the mockery of what the world is seeing these days. And then a solution. They're expert in that. They create the problem and then they bring the solution. Or they need to do something and they invent something. They needed to invade Afghanistan and they made 9/11. They needed to bring Bush re-election and they did Madrid 11th of March, which was a NATO attack, and they said it was Al-Qaeda. They needed an excuse for Trump and Rajoy to meet next Tuesday, and they made Barcelona. And then they have a meeting 5 days before the referendum, and with probably Oriol Junqueras or Carles Puigdemont, which are the top infiltrated moles in the Catalan process, number 1 and 2 in Catalan government, are going to be detained or demoted next week. And then the Truman Show we're living will be reaching its completion. I want to put an example only on how they play with our guts and our hearts to annihilate our brains. We need our brains to bring this about. And I'll explain this briefly, and then I'll talk about why they needed to act against me, considering what the plan was, and how we are organizing ourselves to bring about independence if nothing happens to us. But if something happens to us, there's already people in place who will take the torch. So we actually are going to win. Two main singers in the 60s under Franco in Catalonia are Joan Manuel Serrat and Lluís Llach. Joan Manuel Serrat has lately evolved to singing mainly in Spanish and has a big following passion in South American and Spanish-speaking countries, and Lluís Llach has always remained faithful to Catalan language. So that has meant that mainly, language being a great issue in Catalonia, most pro-indie people, and now Serrat is saying that he doesn't see the referendum clear and he doesn't want Catalonia to be independent. And Lluís Llach, the one that never stopped singing in Catalan, now is a member of parliament. Well, here's the comment I want to make, and a lot of people, sadly, blinded by nationalism, will jump to my neck in Catalonia, but so be it. Joan Manuel Serrat saying that he doesn't want this referendum is being attacked in social media by pro-indie people. But the sad truth is that Lluís Llach, the one they love, the one they cherish, is one of the 72 members of parliament that has a mandate for independence and is not declaring. That's a great example of how they manipulate our brains. Who is more instrumental in avoiding independence? Joan Manuel Serrat by talking, or Lluís Llach by failing to act on the mandate of independence he's got 2 years ago? They are forcing us to attack the ones that are not killing our independence. And it's an important reflection. That's why I went for this little detour. Without trying to get it very personal, because what they did to me is in chapter 2. But you have to understand why hundreds of people, supposedly independent, have been threatening me, insulting me, slandering me, making me pass as a madman, collaborating in having me internated, tortured, pushed to suicide, and socially dead for the last 4 years. 4 years ago, I discovered that the whole plan to murder independence is a rigged referendum. And then I confirmed it when I saw the referendum in Scotland. And when I did a hunger strike, can you imagine how the alarms went? The plan is not to declare UDI because they work for the enemy, to postpone things, and then finally to murder Catalan independence with a Scottish-style referendum. Can you imagine how the alarms go when somebody does a hunger strike, telling that the Scottish referendum was rigged, that our whole leaders work for the enemy and they will never declare independence because they don't work for us, which happens to be 100% of the truth? Well, of course, they needed to silence me, but they couldn't kill me because they would have given me right. If I had died, it would be suspicious. So they had to put me in a mental institution to murder my ideas and to murder me socially. And that's what they did, and that's why they censored me in every media, and that's why they did all the things they did. But I have bad news for them, because every day I was there, I was thinking, this is nothing. There's people who had it much harder for Catalonia and for other causes in the world. So every day I told myself that I was going to survive that, and that I would use it to capitalize the 3 million people that want independence in Catalonia, and that we're gonna get it after the 100 years. So here is the plan. We are 3 million people in Catalonia that want independence, but we don't have a single party, organization, media, nothing that wants independence. They're all lying to us with this referendum that our enemies want. But we are already hundreds of thousands of people who know the truth. Only thing we need is to organize ourselves. There's tremendous books and documentation exposing both the Scottish and the Catalan lies to the people. And this is a message to the thousands of people that are alone in their families or their environments, thinking that they're paranoid or they're pessimist or they don't see things, because actually it's the other way around and it's lonely at the top. The most courageous, intelligent, free-thinking, honest Catalan independentists are the ones that realize that the referendum is a trick. So we are organizing ourselves. There's a party on the making, and we're organizing ourselves in a way that we're gonna bring 68 Catalan women and men to the parliament, and after 300 years of Spanish oppression, we are gonna declare independence ourselves. We are gonna do it, and they cannot do anything to avoid it, because there's too many people who has found out the truth, and they cannot execute the thousands of us that know that we are being betrayed. We are winning, and we will win. Guanyarem. Visca Catalunya lliure!
This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA Radio production.